Girivaradari Yashodanandana Brajadana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Yashodanandana Brajadana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Jai Radha Madhava Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Brajadana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Jai Radha Madhava Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Brajadana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Radha Madhava Jaya Radha Madhava Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajaka Acharya Ashtotara Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajaka Acharya Ashtotara Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Nama Acharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Si Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakun Radha Kun Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Shri Mayapur Navadvip Dham Ki Jai Ganga Maya Ki Jai Jamuna Maya Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai Harinam Sankirtan Yagya Ki Jai Hare Krishna Mahamantra Ki Jai Gaur Premanande All glories to the assembled devotees All glories to the assembled devotees All glories to the assembled devotees All glories to Sri Sri Guru, Sri Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Srila Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. O Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva, all-pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. Narayanam Namaskritam, Naram Chaiva Narottamam, Devyam Saraswatim Vyasam, Tatodayam Mudirayat. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, one should offer his respectful obeisances to the personality of Godhead Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and to Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and Srila Prabhupada, commentator and translator. Nastapreshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Shevaya Bhagavate Uttama Shloki Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. By regular attendance in classes in the Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome in the heart is practically eradicated, and loving service to the personality of Godhead, whose praise with transcendental songs is established in the heart as an irrevocable fact. Hare Krishna, everybody.
Hare Krishna.
Welcome. Srimad Bhagavatam class. The high point of our day. So here we are, reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Creation of the Fourth Order, chapter number 20. Lord Vishnu appears in the sacrificial arena. Text number 27. Yeah. Ata bhajetva kila purushottamam Gunalayam padmakare lalasha Abhyavayore kapati sprido kalir Abhyavayore kapati sprido kalir Nashyat krita tvachcharanai katanayo Ata bhajetva kila purushottamam Gunalayam padmakare valalasha Apyavayore kapati sprido kalir Nasyat krita tvachcharanai katanayo Ata bhajetva kila purushottamam Gunalayam padmakare valalasha Apyavayore kapati sprido kalir Nasyat krita tvachcharanai katanayo Ata bhajetva kila purushottamam Gunalayam padmakare valalasha Apyavayore kapati sprido kalir Nasyat krita tvachcharanai katanayo Bolo.
Ata bhajetva kila purushottamam
Gunalayam padmakare valalasha Apyavayore kapati sprido kalir Nasyat krita tvachcharanai katanayo Ata bhajetva kila purushottamam Gunalayam padmakare valalasha Apyavayore kapati sprido kalir Nasyat krita tvachcharanai katanayo Ata bhajetva kila purushottamam Gunalayam padmakare valalasha Abhyavayore kapati sprido kalir Nasyat krita tvachcharanai katanayo Ata bhajetva kila purushottamam Gunalayam padmakare valalasha Abhyavayor ekapatis prido kalir. Nasyat krita twach charnai katanayo. Atabaje twa kila purushottamam. Gunalayam padmakare valalasa. Apavayor ekapatis prido kalir. Nasyat krita twach charnai katanayo. Synonyms. Ata, thereafter. Therefore. Abaje, I shall engage in devotional service. Dwa, unto you. Akila, all inclusive. Purusha Uttamam, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Guna Alayam, the reservoir of all transcendental qualities. Padmakara, the goddess of fortune, who carries a lotus flower in her hand. Iva, like. Lalasa, being desirous. Api, indeed. Avayo, of Lakshmi and me. Ekapati, one master. Sprido, competing. Kali, quarrel. Na, not. Syat, may take place. Krita, having done. Twacharna, unto your lotus feet. Ekatanayo, one attention. Translation by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Now I wish to engage in the service of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and to serve just like the Goddess of Fortune, who carries a lotus flower in her hand. Because His Lordship, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the reservoir of all transcendental qualities, I am afraid that the Goddess of Fortune and I would quarrel because both of us would be attentively engaged in the same service. Please repeat. Now I wish to engage in the service of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Now I wish to engage in the service of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
And to serve just like the Goddess of Fortune.
And to serve just like the Goddess of Fortune.
Who carries a lotus flower in her hand.
Who carries a lotus flower in her hand.
Because His Lordship, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the reservoir of all transcendental qualities, I am afraid that the Goddess of Fortune and I would quarrel because both of us would be attentively engaged in the same service. Purport. The Lord is here addressed as Akila Purushottama, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord of the entire creation. Purusha means the enjoyer, and Uttama means the best. There are different kinds of Purushas or enjoyers within the universe. Generally, they can be divided into three classes: those who are conditioned, those who are liberated, and those who are eternal. In the Vedas, the Supreme Lord is called the Supreme Eternal of all eternals, Nityo Nityanam. Both the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entities are eternal. The Supreme Eternals are the Vishnu Tattva, or Lord Vishnu and his expansions. So Nitya refers to the Personality of Godhead, beginning from Krishna to Mahavishnu, Narayan, and other expansions of Lord Krishna. As stated in the Brahma Samhita, Ramadi Murteshu, there are millions and trillions of expansions of Lord Vishnu as Rama, Nrsimha, Varaha, and other incarnations. All of them are called eternals. The word mukta refers to the living entities who never come within this material world. The Baddhas are those living entities who are almost eternally living within this material world. The Baddhas are struggling very hard within the material world to become free from the threefold miseries of material nature and to enjoy life, whereas the muktas are already liberated. They never come into this material world. Lord Vishnu is the master of the material world, and there is no question of his being controlled by material nature. Consequently, Lord Vishnu is addressed here as Purushottama, the best of all living entities, namely Vishnu Tattvas and Jiva Tattvas. It is a great offense, therefore, to compare Lord Vishnu to the Jiva Tattva, or to consider them on an equal level. The Mayavadi philosophers equate the Jivas and the Supreme Lord and consider them to be one, but this is the greatest offense to the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu. Here in the material world, we have practical experience that a superior person is worshipped by an inferior one. Similarly, Purushottama, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, or Lord Vishnu, is always worshipped by others. Prithu Maharaj therefore decided to engage in the service of the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu. Prithu Maharaj is considered to be an incarnation of Lord Vishnu, but he's called a Shakti Avesh avatar. Another significant word in this verse is Gunalaya, which refers to Vishnu as the reservoir of all transcendental qualities. The Mayavadi philosophers, in accordance with the impersonalistic view, take the absolute truth to be nirguna, without qualities, but actually the Lord is the reservoir of all good qualities. One of the most important qualities of the Lord is his inclination to his devotees, for which he is called Bhakta Vatsal. The devotees are always very much inclined to render service unto the lotus feet of the Lord, and the Lord is also very much inclined to accept loving service from his devotees. In that exchange of service, there are many transcendental transactions, which are called transcendental qualitative activities. Some of the transcendental qualities of the Lord are that he is omniscient, omnipresent, all-pervasive, all-powerful, the cause of all causes, the absolute truth, the reservoir of all pleasures, the reservoir of all knowledge, the all-auspicious, and so on. Prithu Maharaj desired to serve the Lord with the goddess of fortune, but this desire does not mean that he was situated on the platform of Madhurya Ras. The goddess of fortune is engaged in the service of the Lord in the Ras of Madhurya, conjugal love. Although her position is on the chest of the Lord, the goddess of fortune, in her position as a devotee, takes pleasure in serving the lotus feet of the Lord. Prithu Maharaj was thinking only of the lotus feet of the Lord because he is on the platform of Dasya Ras, or servitorship of the Lord. From the next verse, we learn that Prithu Maharaj was thinking of the goddess of fortune as the universal mother, Jagan Mata. Consequently, there was no question of his competing with her on the platform of Madhurya Ras. Nonetheless, he feared that she might take offense at his engaging in the service of the Lord. This suggests that in the absolute world there is sometimes competition between servitors in the service of the Lord, but such competition is without malice. In the Vaikuntha world, if a devotee excels in the service of the Lord, others do not become envious of his excellent service, but rather aspire to come to the platform of that service. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Jnana-tamarandasya Gnanjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namah Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeyam Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostite Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavanishwari Vishubhanu Shuti Devi Paramami Haripriye Vancha kalpatarabhyascha kripasindhubhyev cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namane Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Prachadare Nirvashesha Shamyavari Pashtacha Deshatarare Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Namaste Jivanandaya Dasaya Vanacharine Prabhupada Vallabhaya Singhasila Vinodine Gyanadvanta Gamanam Pashticha Patitatmanam Gyana Gurutaya Chitarine Chakshashe Namaha. So this is a beautiful verse to discuss, and you're seeing it right here. You're seeing surrender made very simply. And put very simply, this is a verse of surrender. Lord Maharaj Prithu, after going through a struggle and trying to maintain a certain level of prestige, a certain level of reputation due to performing 100 horse sacrifices, has been corrected by Lord Brahma And due to his attitude, the Lord was pleased and the Lord has appeared. And now Maharaj Prithu is offering prayers, and now we're seeing his mood and his devotional attitude appear. And beautiful verses throughout the last section of Maharaj Prithu's surrender. And so now Maharaj Prithu is saying, now I wish to engage in the service of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is the platform of surrender, where surrender begins. Now I wish to engage in the service of the Supreme Lord. So what does the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra mean? O Lord, O energy of the Lord, please engage me in your transcendental loving service. O Krishna, O Radha, please engage me in your service. And conversely, that means that please don't engage me in the service of Maya. Please engage me in the service of Radha and Krishna. Hare Krishna. That we don't want to serve the external potency. We want to serve the internal potency of the Supreme Lord. But either way, we're serving. So Maharaj Prithu is surrendering. Now I wish to engage in the service of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. After all that has happened, he's making that decision to serve Krishna, to serve God. And so each person, each devotee has to eventually come to that point. Actually, every living entity who's seeking spiritual knowledge eventually comes to that point. Bahunam janmanamante gyanavam mam prapadyate. That after many, many births and deaths, one who's actually a gyanavan, one who actually possesses transcendental knowledge, surrenders to Krishna. So, when you look at that, that surrender, that's the most predominant theme in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna puts forward is that if you want to end your suffering in the material existence, surrender to me. And Krishna famously says, Sarva dharman parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja aham tvam sarva papebhyo moksha shamima suchaha. He's explaining to abandon all varieties of religion and surrender unto me. I will relieve you of all sinful activities. Do not fear. So Krishna is saying Sarva Dharman. So Dharma, it's kind of actually that verse is sometimes even considered controversial in India and places because they think maybe it was miswritten by Ganesh. Maybe it was Sarva Adharma Paridyaja. He's saying surrender all Adharma. But no, Krishna is saying Sarva Dharma. He's surrendering all Dharma because Dharma is of different levels. There's mundane dharmas, there's higher dharmas, and there's supreme dharma, paradharma. So when Krishna is saying sarva dharman parityaja, Krishna is saying abandon all of our material dharmas. And that material dharmas are based off the bodily conception of life. Namely, Arjuna thinking himself a Kshatriya, Arjuna thinking himself a Pandava, Arjuna thinking himself the family of the Kuru dynasty, Arjuna thinking himself the student of Drona Acharya, Arjuna thinking himself the grandchild of Bhishma Dev. So all these are material dharmas, but there's a paradharma, and that paradharma is what we call Sanatan Dharma, the dharma of the soul. Sanatan Dharma means the eternal religion of the soul. So Sutta Goswami, famously says, Savai Pumsam Paradharmo Yatta Bhakti Radhoksaje Ahaitu Kyaprati Hataya Yatma Suprasidati. That the supreme dharma for all humanity is that by which one can attain loving service to the personality of Godhead, adhoksaje. Such service is unmotivated and uninterrupted, and that will completely satisfy the self. So that paradharma, that supreme occupation, is to engage in the loving service of Krishna. And so in Arjuna's case, Krishna is explaining that don't fight for, Krishna actually, he begins speaking on a very material level. He says, happy are those Kshatriyas who such fighting opportunities come unsought. Because by fighting, it opens the doors to the heavenly planets. So Krishna is speaking on a material level. He says, it's going to open the heavenly planets for you. What are you whining for? And then Krishna begins to gradually elevate Arjuna to this final stage where he's saying, just do it for me, because it's my desire that you fight. So this is that supreme occupation, that we're doing everything as a loving offering to Krishna in a way that pleases Krishna. So that's a common theme throughout the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna also says, Daiviheshu gunamayi mama maya dharatyaya mameva ye prapadyante maya metam tarantite. That this material ocean is very difficult to overcome, but for one who surrenders unto me, they can easily cross beyond it. So what is this surrender? Krishna says, Mam ekam sharanam vrajaha. So what that means is, you're making Krishna number one, literally, mam ekam, make me number one in your life. Make me the object and the goal of your life, the goal of your service. So the material dharma on all levels is based on sense gratification. How am I satisfying myself? So each person is thinking, how am I going to satisfy myself? How am I going to extract happiness today from those around me, from, my job, my family, my friends, my acquaintances? And these are different levels of sense gratification. There's gross sense gratification, which is based on the five senses. There's subtle sense gratification based on, I want profit, I want fame, I want to be adored, I want distinction, I got to be distinct and different from everybody else. This is called, Prabhupada calls this subtle sex desire, subtle sense gratification. And that sense gratification, gradually accentuates itself beyond just the body to my family, my country, my species, my world. But the real identity of the soul is that we are eternally part and parcel of Krishna. So when we act on that platform in loving service to Krishna, we're relieved of all these upadis. Sarvapadi Vinir Muktam. We're relieved of all the upadis by engaging in the service of Krishna and by giving pleasure to Krishna's senses rather to our senses. Rishikena, Rishikesha, Sevanam Bhakti Rutama. Bhakti Utate. I got that one wrong. Is that right, Ganga? Rishikena, Rishikesha, Sevanam Bhakti Rutama? Uchate. So we have to please Krishna's senses. We have to give pleasure to Krishna's senses rather than to our senses, and this is bhakti. So that is the difference between the material dharma and the spiritual dharma. The spiritual dharma is to act in such a way that one gives pleasure to Krishna's senses. And so in that, we have to surrender to that conception of life. We kind of think sometimes, I think devotees, and myself included, think that, I surrendered to Krishna. But actually, surrender is a moment-by-moment activity, that I'm constantly making the choice to serve Krishna and not serve Maya. Every single moment, making that choice to serve Krishna, not Maya. So it's moment-by-moment activity. And therefore, we have to be enthused moment by moment and have our intelligence about us so we can continually surrender. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he, in his Jaiva Dharma, speaks of 6 symptoms of surrender, beautiful symptoms of surrender. And the first is Anukulyasya Sankalpa, doing what is favorable for unalloyed bhakti, doing only what is favorable for unalloyed bhakti. So if one wants to practice Krishna consciousness, the very first thing is one has to accept that which is favorable and reject that which is unfavorable. It's very simple. That means training the mind and surrendering the mind to the order of the spiritual master, the guru, the sadhu, the shastra, that I'm accepting something based on its favorability to my service. Because this is going to hinder my service, because this is going to place me deeper in the bodily conception of life, I therefore reject it. I accept this because it's going to be favorable for my devotional service. So this is very important, that one accepts only that which is favorable for devotional service, rather than accepting something that's going to hinder my spiritual progress, even though it may give me pleasure. So this is the training the mind. The second stage is Pratikulyasya Varjanam, rejecting everything unfavorable for unalloyed bhakti. So what is something unfavorable for unalloyed bhakti? Someone give me an example of unfavorable.
Sleeping too much.
Sleeping too much. Anything else? What? Drinking beer on Ekadasi. Beer is not Ekadasi.
Eating too much.
Eating too much. These are good ones. I was thinking like drugs, illicit sex. That's what I was thinking.
We already know that. We already know that we're eggs, so that's like you gotta find tune.
Yeah. Well, Lita's was good. That's a good one. Is sleeping too much. That's a great example because it's very favorable for devotional service to wake up early. It's extraordinarily favorable. If you wake up very early and chant your rounds, it's just your day becomes supercharged if you chant your rounds early. And it's so unfavorable if you sleep in, which I very, very rarely do. I don't think since I've been a devotee I've slept past 5:30. that's like late. But if you sleep really late, then it's going to be very difficult. Your consciousness isn't going to have the same luster that it would have if you're performing devotional service. So we have to accept what's favorable, reject what's unfavorable. Then Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, Rakshishyati Vishvasho, having faith that only Bhagavan is one's protector. So having faith that Krishna is our only protector. This is actually a symptom of surrender. Because in the material world, everybody's constantly taking shelter. And this is kind of our position if we actually analyze what's happening, is that we are either surrendering to Maya or surrendering to Krishna. We're either taking shelter of Maya or taking shelter of Krishna. What does it mean to take shelter of Maya? It means when I am forced by my body, by my mind, by the modes of material nature to feel a certain way, rather than go chant Krishna's holy name, rather than associate with the devotees, rather than engage in the activities of bhakti, I'm going to engage in the activities of Maya. So I'm going to distract myself with sense gratification. That's basically what people are doing in the material world, is that they're distracting themselves with sense gratification. And anytime there's some, awkward situation going on, what do people do now? They just look at their phone. Now I'm in my world and you can't hurt me. You can't touch me. I remember doing that as a kid, like that. I thought that was just me, but everybody thinks like that. But this was right when right when the smartphone first came out. I was like a 6th grader. I remember walking. I had this really, Augie knows this story, but we're not going to go into that. But I had this really horrendous neighbor. Like, he was like a demon, and he actually one time attacked me and broke my eye. And I have to walk past his house. I didn't want to look at him or anything, so I would just pretend I'm on the phone, and so that was I'm protected because I'm on the phone. I thought I thought I was smart, but I realized that everybody's thinking the same way, that anytime there's some situation, they distract themselves. And so that's just a minor example, but there's so many examples of how people take shelter of Maya. This is what drugs are. People take shelter of drugs because they have some feeling and rather than to face the feeling, they just want to, smoke it away or go have illicit sex or watch porn, whatever it may be. They're using these things to distract themselves from that feeling. And from the revelation, the spiritual revelation that this body is a place of suffering. I mean, when we actually analyze our existence in this world, it's not a very nice thing. Krishna explains, Mamaivam sho jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana, manashtash indriyani prakriti stani karshati, that we're all suffering due to the 5 senses and the mind. And, this body is temporary and full of miseries. Dukkalayam ashashvatam. And this is a temporary, miserable world. And so how did we, the living entity who's eternal, full of knowledge and full of bliss, find ourselves in this unfortunate situation? And rather than analyze that, I'd rather just engage in sense gratification. And so we have to have faith that Krishna is our protector, that Krishna is our shelter. So whenever times get tough, we can take shelter of Krishna. And that's in realizing that nothing else is going to give me pleasure or give me happiness. When one actually has that realization that all of these material things are fallible soldiers and they're not going to actually give me any happiness or give me any satisfaction. They're cheating me, and they've been cheating me for many, many lifetimes. So by that knowledge, by that transcendental knowledge, one can actually take shelter of Krishna. That's why I sang that song on the Christmas, talent show, the Hare Krishna Hallelujah song, because, it's saying that, what is it? That, love is not a victory march. It's a cold and broken Hare Krishna. So we have all these different conceptions about how joyful the world is going to be, but really, that state of being broken and having no one to turn to but God, that's when we're going to feel real love. And Kunti Maharani She confirms that in her prayer when she prays to Krishna, let these calamities fall upon me again and again. Because of these calamities, I see you. So only Krishna is our protector. And that is evident in the residents of Vrindavan, that they never take shelter of anybody but Krishna. And you see that, when Indra came, who did they take shelter of? When Indra sent his Samvantaka cloud to destroy the residents of Vrindavan, they took shelter of Krishna. Krishna lifted Govardhan Hill. When the forest fire came, they all cried, Krishna, Krishna. And, not only that, they have so much confidence in Krishna. When Aghasura was there, they said, this is, there's this intense, massive snake, miles long. And what did the cowherd boys do? They walked right into his mouth. I don't know, I like this joke, but I see it. If I saw an Aghasura, I think I would need a new dhoti. But the cowherd boys, they just walked right in his mouth. And then they died, and then Krishna brought them back to life, and Krishna saved them. And it's funny, because if you read the Bhagavatam, I don't know if it's mentioned as clearly as in Krishna, but in the Bhagavatam, Krishna is like, what are you guys doing? You're going in the mouth of, I guess I have to save you now. So the devotees in Vrindavan, they have no shelter but Krishna. Krishna is their only refuge. And that is, real surrender. So one has to have that. And that's funny, because that verse, Sarvadharman Prityaja, Mamekam Sharanam Vraja, that word Vraja means to run, but Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he gives these elaborate insights into the mind of Krishna, saying how Krishna had been speaking for so long that he remembered Vrindavan. He said, Vrajaha, that this is the real, it's connecting to Vraj, that real absolute surrender. So then continuing on, Gotruve Vrajanam, accepting Bhagavan as one's only maintainer. This is a powerful point, because Krishna is our maintainer. That when one realizes that, life becomes so much more peaceful. That I'm not being maintained by anybody but Krishna. And all the people and circumstances that seemingly maintain me are really just Krishna. And Krishna can pull the rug out from them at any time if he desires. And so in that way, one can become peaceful. And one should have confidence and faith that Krishna is going to maintain me. And then look at Srila Prabhupada's surrender. Srila Prabhupada came across the ocean with 40 rupees. Just on the whole understanding, whole faith that Krishna is going to maintain me. I'm going to trust Krishna. If Krishna wants to kill me, no one can hurt me. And no one can save me. If Krishna wants to save me, no one can kill me. So Krishna is our maintainer. And also, it's good to realize that Krishna is also the maintainer of everybody else. That's one of the biggest, snares of false ego, is that, I'm this person, I'm maintaining the family. I'm maintaining the wife. And I'm maintaining my relationships. And therefore, one has that's the false ego. And that's actually the desire to play God. That I'm thinking I'm the maintainer of so many people. But in reality, Krishna is the maintainer. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur again demonstrates that level of surrender. And he says, Krishna, my wife is yours, my family is yours, my children are yours, my job is yours, my money is yours, everything is yours. And you're the real maintainer. And so we do our duty, we do our best, but ultimately Krishna is the maintainer. Krishna is the real maintainer. So in that way, you see that, great devotees throughout history, throughout the Bhagavatam, leave their kingdoms, leave their families, leave their responsibilities to engage in the supreme dharma of service to the Lord. And that can also cause some confusion, because in one sense, you're seeing that, Maharaj Bharat is leaving his Kshatriya duty to go and live in the forest and render service to Krishna, whereas Krishna is telling Arjuna to render service by fighting. The difference is that, well, there is no difference, but what it is that the ultimate principle of bhakti is that what is Krishna's desire? If it's Krishna's desire that you fight, then that's ultimate surrender to fight. If it's Krishna's desire that you go and be renounced, then that's the ultimate duty. And how do we understand Krishna's desire? Through the bona fide spiritual master, through the sadhus, and through the Shastra. So Krishna is the maintainer. Atma Nishepa, complete submission of oneself. So one should be completely submitted to the will of the Lord. That's surrender. When the Lord asks us to do something, when the devotees or the guru is asking us to perform some service, we submit and we do it. And that can be very difficult. That can be very easy sometimes, but ultimately, that's also allowing us to be liberated. Is that single quality of submitting to our service is the key to liberation. Krishna explains that one has to tolerate the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course time, because they're like the appearance of the winter and summer seasons. Then he says that one who does tolerate is qualified to be liberated. He's eligible for liberation. So what does that tolerance mean? It doesn't mean like we're just going to go, sit in the fire and then sit in the cold water and then. No, actually, that means that we're tolerating according to our service, that no matter what happens, we're dedicated to doing our service. And in all circumstances, we're going to do our service. I think Parameshwar Prabhu, last time you gave Bhagavatam class, you were explaining really nicely that, just get up and do your service. And, that's our greatest shelter. That's our greatest refuge, is that we just continue on with our service and tolerate whatever obstacles we may face in that service. And just be humble, be submitted. In that way, our minds aren't wavering. And in that way, we become peaceful. I'm trying to remember the verse. I don't remember. Anyways. And then the last one, number 6, is Karpanye. Feeling meek, humble, insignificant, wretched, and materially destitute. So this is the opposite of the self-help gurus, right? They're always telling you, you go stand in the mirror and tell yourself you're it and you're the one, and you're the greatest. And I know many people, not just one, but I know many people who have they have like things written on their mirror, like you were the best, you're the gangster, all the different things they write on the mirror, I know many people. Because they think you should have this conception of yourself, but this is all false. That's the thing, is they say, you got to be positive. This is one of my points I make a lot in my classes, is that we're talking about being positive. Well, we should be positive, but the truth is definitely more positive than a lie all the time. The truth has a more positive energy than a falsity. And so the greatest positivity is to live in the truth. What is the truth? You forgot Krishna. You left the spiritual world due to envy, and you came into the material world, and you're suffering for millions of births. And, we really have no qualification whatsoever to ever see Krishna, to ever get mercy. But because of Lord Chaitanya's mercy, because of the mercy of the Vaishnavas, we're getting the opportunity to practice devotional service. That truth is so much more positive than any type of false conception one can make of themselves. So when one realizes the greatness of God, as one becomes closer to God, they become more meek, more humble, more insignificant, and they feel like they're materially more and more wretched. And there's a nice analogy given in the Orthodox Christian tradition. I told this before, but I'll tell it again. It's really nice. There was one great Orthodox saint, and he was so great, but he always thought himself the worst sinner, and he'd always claim himself, I'm the greatest sinner that ever walked this earth. And it was all of his followers, they were saying, you're a great saint. You're not a sinner. He says, I'm the greatest sinner. And you're a great saint. I'm the greatest sinner. So it was just continuous. And so finally they asked him, why do you think yourself the greatest sinner? And he explained, okay, well, the saintly person always feels himself lower and lower and lower because, and he gave an analogy. And they were like in, this is Eastern Orthodoxy, so that area. And they were in a very poor village. He said, if I gave you, in 1,000, whatever their currency is, I'm going to say dollars, $1,000, what would you be? I would be the richest man in town. And so then if I sent you to Cairo, because this is Eastern Orthodoxy, Cairo, like Coptic Christian, if I sent you to Cairo and you had $1,000, what would you be? So I would be I would be a relatively wealthy man, but I would be middle class. But then if I sent you to Constantinople with that $1,000, what would you be? I would be a poor man. So as you get closer and closer to Krishna, your wealth, whatever you have, becomes smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. So therefore, the saintly person who has unlimited good qualities feels tiny, more small, more insignificant as he has his progressive realization of Krishna consciousness. Because he's seeing Krishna, and the saintly person can see how glorious Krishna is. And therefore, he feels himself smaller and smaller and smaller. So someone who is really surrendered feels themselves very meek, because they can understand that all the previous things, that Krishna is our only maintainer, Krishna is our only protector. This is a very dangerous world. We live in danger at every step. So in that way, we have to surrender to Krishna. And we have 4 minutes. I'm going to continue just these 2 little points. That was the 6 symptoms of surrender. One thing Prabhupada mentions in this verse is this material envy or spiritual envy. And, the spiritual competition versus material envy. And that's something that took me some time to understand. I think I'm starting to kind of have some realization on it now by Krishna's grace. Because I hate the feeling of being envious. I hate it. It really annoys me. And, it gets in the way of so many things, so many relationships, so many things. It's a horrible feeling to have. But the spiritual aspect of seeing someone doing service and desiring to do service like them is not envy. It's positive and it's good. And I was thinking, let me see. Oh, yeah, envy is like the scorn of our communities. But the way to overcome it is to, first off, remember the goal. This is something that's always helped me a lot in overcoming any types of negative or unfavorable emotions is, if we think that our goal in devotional service is to do anything material, to have any type of position, to have any type of, to do any type of service well, that is ultimately secondary goals. We shouldn't maybe have those goals, but our real goal is to develop pure love of God. When you have that focus in, when we tune into that ultimately the goal of this whole thing is to have pure love of God, it really relieves a lot of these material, comparisons we may be making with others. That ultimately the goal is to have pure love, and that the gopis, they were very simple folk, but they had the highest love. And you see that throughout the Bhagavatam and throughout the scriptures, that Krishna is pleased with that pure love and that devotion. And when we realize that everything we're doing is simply to develop devotion, it relieves that symptom. Another thing is to be personal. That this is Bhaktivedanta Maharaj was speaking about this in one lecture I had heard. And I thought to myself, it makes a lot of sense, but I kind of analyzed it and found it to be true that you having some enmity with another devotee, or there's some type of competitive vibe or something that's not right, generally it relieves itself after you get to know that devotee. When you become very close and intimate with that devotee, once you know them and become their friend and become their well-wisher, then that envy goes away, because you understand that they have their power, their blessings, and their abilities that Krishna is giving them, and I have mine. And Vaisheshika Prabhu always says that everything in this world happens because we deserve it. It's a perfect world. It's perfectly just. So if someone else is getting more, attention, getting more fame, profit, adoration, distinction, more recognition, that's because they deserve it. And Krishna says, as they surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. We can accept, our position and just continue to try hard, and that way admire them. And the biggest thing is, I think the biggest thing is always do our best, or always, we can't do our best. My Gurudev always says that, not to say do your best, because we'll never feel like we're doing our best, but always try very hard to do service to Krishna. If you seriously are enthusiastic and you chant your rounds, you chant good rounds, you read the books, you do your service with enthusiasm, then you'll feel satisfied by that service. Whereas if you know that you're not really putting the effort in and you're lazy, when you see someone actually putting the effort in, it tends to bother you. That's also that goes to do with anything material. So, but if we know, like, hey, I'm doing all this, we'll be getting mercy. We may not be getting the same type of mercy that person's getting, but we'll be getting mercy. So in that way, we can overcome envy. And it all comes back to the fundamental principle of tolerance. Tolerating all the different things that may come in our devotional service, having that vivasyatmika buddhi, that dedication to the path, tolerating and developing humility. When those two things are present, the chanting becomes successful, and that fills our entire life with auspiciousness. And we can become successful in overcoming so many anarthas. So it's 8:51. I think Chakrayuta cooked today, so we can have we'll do questions and answers.
Prabhupada states that if someone is, if you're envious or have a bad relationship with someone, then also the cure is serving them, which is the most difficult thing if you're envious of someone. But if you actually serve them and, like you said, develop a relationship through that, then that envy actually turns into appreciation.
Exactly.
And when we're talking about, being humble and the most fallen, the most sinful, that's not low self-esteem, because the real self is the soul, and that's brilliant as millions of suns. And we should take pride, transcendental pride, actually, in being a devotee and being a servant of Krishna. But that's spiritual, not materially. Materially, we can, do any service, feel ourselves, not qualified. But there's a difference there between, low self-esteem.
Prabhupada did say that in one point. He said, no, we should be proud to be a devotee. Prabhupada always walked with so much dignity. You can't think of anybody who walked with more dignity than Srila Prabhupada. Gauranga Prabhu.
Yeah, reading the bhajans of our acharyas, sometimes they'll express this mood of just feeling insignificant, feeling destitute, things like this. But they're in ecstasy. So I'm always thinking, if you feel lower than the lowest, if you feel destitute, but you feel like crap, that's not spiritual. That's not for Krishna. That's material. So on the spiritual platform, like these things, it's just another form of ecstatic love for Krishna and this thing. And then also, I remember one time I asked somebody, is it wrong to feel like I'm gonna go back to Godhead in this lifetime? And they said, no, actually a devotee should be very confident that Krishna will save them.
We should have confidence.
So that's the difference between material confidence and spiritual confidence.
And Rupa Goswami said at some point, he said that we should have full confidence that we should have full faith in Krishna's mercy and have no doubt about it, that it's gonna take place. And that's also a symptom of surrender. I had some realization about when you really feel fallen and you have that consciousness and you chant your rounds in that mind state, really trying to feel you get so much reciprocation from Krishna. And it's not that you're feeling so you feel like, wow, you are so amazing, Krishna. It really puts your focus on Krishna's mercy, Krishna's greatness, that Krishna is, some people say, like, what's your favorite Krishna pastime? I say, my favorite pastime is that Krishna every single day somehow or another comes in the form of the holy name and gives me some association every day. And so, the fact that Krishna, you're here with me, and it's so amazing that someone like me can get your mercy. So that consciousness really enlivens us, rather than it's that feeling fallen that it empowers us to want to overcome our anarthas. But if it's just like, I'm too fallen to do service, that's pride, right, Lolita?
Yeah.
So you always say, you told one devotee, like, you're just prideful. Yeah. It's very short for blue.
You cited Vaisheshika Prabhu, the saying of that if somebody has something, they have it because they deserve it.
Yeah.
So what if you see that somebody has something that's that they're really suffering? They have some suffering. So what's the attitude? Oh, you deserve it. Is
No.
that the same thing?
We still have to be compassionate to them. And we don't want to be callous. That's not our philosophy, to just be callous and, say, I mean, in one sense, everybody is suffering in the material world and we all deserve to suffer in the material world. In the other sense, Krishna is so kind that he's coming here and trying to help us and give us devotional service. So you're supposed to be compassionate and give them and encourage them in devotional service and therefore relieve them of their misery, not just say, oh, you deserve it. And that's not saintly. But we're servants of Krishna, and Krishna's mission in the form of Lord Chaitanya is to deliver the fallen conditioned soul. So we should assist Lord Chaitanya in some way, shape, or form and encourage all the fallen conditioned souls to, take shelter of Krishna's lotus feet.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, anything else quickly? Ananda Prabhu.
You were saying people have these things written on their mirrors in the bathroom.
Yeah.
You're the greatest.
Yeah.
Giriraj Maharaj tells about before he saw Srila Prabhupada for the first time, you know what he had on his
Yeah, it was a great story. Yeah. You are God. I am God, right? You are God.
You were God. Yeah.
I said that Srila Prabhupada, it's a beautiful story. He tells how Prabhupada said, Prabhupada said, do you want to serve God or do you want to be God? And Giriraj Swami said he felt like Prabhupada had seen him down the street, down the road, and into his bathroom and saw that mirror. And said that, Giriraj Swami, when he bowed down, he was so embarrassed because he somehow felt that Prabhupada was seeing him so intensely, he didn't even want to get up. He just stayed down for a long time.
I think he said he asked Srila Prabhupada, he said everyone says that their religion is the truth.
Yeah, that was
So
it.
how do you know who has the truth? And Srila Prabhupada said, it depends, what is your goal? Do you want to be God or do you want to serve God? Because if you want to be God, you cannot be God. God has always been God. You can't be God by meditation or anything like that. So it was that whole.
Yeah, it's a nice pastime. I thought of that when I was saying that mirror thing. I thought of that pastime too. So remember that. Okay, Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Srila Prabhupada ki. Or Premanande. Here, I need to find my black.